Howdy folks. So we're going to do a quick series of videos here on how to do file input and output with C++. And this is going to be a super common, super useful thing to do. We have a separate file stored on our computer that we're going to either access some information from or put some information in to save later. This really gets used in almost everything. A real classic example is something like a high score list for like a game. So if you wanted to make it so when the person quit the game, you'd want to write all those high scores to a separate file so that then the next time they opened up that game, you get to see where that was. So save game files are like this. Oftentimes like when we work with like data, like, saving off, if I make a program that, is keeping track of like purchases for a company or, users, for logging into a site. I want to save that information somewhere. And so being able to grab that information from a file and putting it in other places, super helpful. Saving off settings, all these kind of things is what we use this for. So for today, let's just take a quick look. A couple of things we'll do. So this is the file that we're going to use, and we'll notice that it's called example.txt. It's a little small up here. And it's just a file that's full of numbers. And you'll notice that I kind of made them so that there's a row here has 6 numbers across. They're all sorts of different sizes, but each row, I know that there's 6 numbers, and they're all separated by commas. Oftentimes this is called a comma separated value file. It might have a different extension. It might have a .csv instead of a .txt. But in this case, that's how I saved it. So knowing all this stuff will be really helpful. And in general, if we're either writing to a text file or reading from a text file, we want to sort of have a sense of like how the information's it's organized, because that's going to become important later on. So this one, just a bunch of numbers, and it's 7 lines long and 6 things wide. So we'll keep that into consideration when we're playing it out. So in this first video, I just want to go into the basics of like how to like open a file and how to like look at it sort of line by line. In later videos, we'll look at it and how to do a little bit more detail with that. But right now, I just kind of want to get that sort of basic, like, let's open a file, let's get something to print out. So what we can see here, let me do my little zoom in thing so we can see this a little bit better, is that I have added a new include called fstream. And the fstream is basically the file streaming commands. There's actually 2. There's one if stream, which is input file stream, and there's one called of stream, which is the output file stream. And right now we're just going to work on reading stuff, and then we'll work on writing on that in a second video. So I'm going to include the old fstream. And then in this case, I got to know which file I'm going to open. So I make a string called the file name that puts in example.txt. Now, it's really important that we have to sort of take a minute to think about how files are stored on our computer, because normally files are stored in like a directory. So, it might be that, on the computer, it might be like C:\\, program files, something like this, and this is where, example.txt, like it might be like it's on the C drive in a specific folder, and this is the file that I want. So when I write in like which file I want to get and when I actually want to like load it up, I have to sort of like think like, do I know where this file is? And so right now, you'll see here, let me switch over. I actually made the text file here. I kind of made them look weird so you could see it a little bit, but here's the text file that's actually the example.txt, and it is in the same folder as the IO example. That's the name of my C++ file that I made. So as long as these are in the same folder, I actually don't care like where on my computer it is, because I'm just saying, hey, look in the folder that you're at for the example thing. If we end up, making fancier programs, we might organize things in folders and tell it to look in a similar folder. You can kind of look that up if that becomes important. But in this case, it's important for me because I have the programming projects folder, CS examples, and then I'm just making sure that my C++ file and the text file are in the same place, so I don't have to sweat about it. If you're doing it on Replit, just make sure they're in the same REPL, and then it'll work just fine. So you don't have to sweat it like that. So in this case, I'm just putting in the name of the text file that I want because it's in the same directory. And then I'm going to try to open that file. So in this case, I made a little IF stream, which is open a file to pull stuff out of, and I gave it a name. In this case, I gave it the file to read name. And I have to send it which file am I going to try to open up? Well, I just, I'm going to do this. So there you go. So again, this is like an object. This is kind of its constructor, and I'm giving it all the things it needs to get made. So once I do that, I actually want to have like sort of a little double check to see if it's actually open. So this little command here, file to read, well, that's the name of what I called my stream. I can actually check to see, is it open? And if that's true, then I'm going to go inside this if statement. But the else is going to be that I could not find the file. And so like, let's say I, accidentally typoed this by putting in a 1 instead of an L. And then when I run it, you'll see it says could not find file because it couldn't find that file. Whereas if I put in this L, when I go and run it, it's going to do the thing that I ask it to do. Okay. So always want to have that in just because, I don't know, it's sort of good practice to see if the file's open, especially if you're trying to write to a file or something like that. You just want to make sure you have the right thing. So the next thing I'm going to do is just the most basic thing, which is I'm just going to grab one line of the file out. And that's what I want to sort of focus on right now. So we're going to make a string, because all lines that come out of the file, like they default to being strings. So if I'm going to grab a line out of that text file, it's just going to assume that I want it to be a string. And then I'm going to have to do stuff to like turn it into numbers or get it to think about it a different way. But often, you know what? Having it come as a string is just fine. So I'm going to use a new command, which is called getLine. And so getLine lets us get a line from a place. And it's actually kind of interesting because you can use getLine in combination with cin to grab lines of text, because getLine works with streams. And it turns out that our good old IO stream is also a stream. So this is something that you can play around with and grab stuff from cin so that you don't have that problem where you can't get spaces, but not so much on that right now. Okay, so I'm going to get line and I'm going to feed it the line, the file that I want, and where I'm going to save the line once I grab it. Okay, so here I'm just going to grab basically the first line out of this thing, and I'm just going to print it out. So when I run this, you'll see that it grabbed the first line of our deal. Let me just show you that's the case. And we'll go back. But now, okay, that's cool, but wouldn't it be nice if I could grab like all the lines of it, like, one after the other? So this is where we can add in another like kind of thing is we want to say like, hey, keep doing this over and over again, right? So I probably could have just made my string line like out here. I don't need to, make it in here. So I'll put it back up there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, if the file's open, I'm going to just throw this in a while loop. So I'm going to say while not file to read .eof. EOF is short for end of file. So basically, I'm going to say, hey, while I'm not at the end of the file, then I can grab all of the stuff, like kind of one after another. So if we give this a good run, so let me close out this. I didn't change very much, right? All I did was say, hey, grab the thing. But you can see that I've gone through and I've just pulled out each line one by one and printed it to the screen. So that's going to kind of form the basis for a lot of things that we're going to do. So for instance, I might want to make a vector of type string. Oops, better put the right brackets on that. That is, maybe it's things from file. And I could, instead of just couting this, I could just push it in. I could do things from file dot pushback, and I could just push back that line. And so then when I get back down to the bottom here, I could do a nice little, cout things from file dot size. Cool. So I can probably want things there. And let me get my spacing in order because, that just makes life a little bit easier. Cool. I can see all this stuff is actually inside my main. So now if I run this, and you can see that I have 7 things in my list, which is exactly what I expected because there's 7 lines in that file. So that's kind of what we're going to start with. Okay, so we have this file, we can open it up, and we can push stuff into the list. Next time we'll kind of talk about how to break it up into little chunks and then turn it into numbers if we actually cared about numbers. Cheers.